All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Task Force working session of the Homeless Task Force. Appreciate everybody's time, and Task Force members, happy Monday to you, and public, thank you for being with us here in person or watching online. Appreciate everybody's participation so far in the Homeless Task Force. Task Force members, thanks for coming back to Carnegie Town Hall. This just made it easier. I know it's a little bit weird sitting in front of microphones and all that, but the reality is it just makes recording easier, and we do have a lot of people from the public engaging with this. So I hope you see that as a positive. I know it can be difficult being on camera, but there's a lot of people from the public emailing, calling, and wanting to engage with this topic. So appreciate your willingness to be here and participate in that manner. Today's meeting is going to be a little bit different than our previous three. We're going to have more time for open discussion, and so there might be just lots of little rabbit trails, craziness going on here and there. At different times, if I say to you, hey, parking lot is just a tool I use to say, hey, we're kind of talking about something that doesn't relate here. Not that it's a bad idea. So for example, if you're talking about getting a mini donut machine for Carnegie Town Hall, it's a great idea, but it probably doesn't relate to the Homeless Task Force. So I might just say parking lot. Jim will note that what we were talking about it and try to bring it back together on topic, and we'll kind of see where the discussion leads and how things end up today. Just a quick reminder, task force members, there's a microphone in front of you. If you'd make sure that light is green before you talk. Light green before you talk. So today we are focused on objective number 1 on our task force objectives there, looking at policy that guides future city involvement, if any, with local shelter capacity and available needs. Just a quick update for task force members. You'll recall at our last meeting, we were focused on objective 2 about engaging with homeless individuals on the street. At that meeting, we formed a small little informal working group. We met, had a really good conversation, lots of fun. I would say dove into much more detail, specifically met with South Dakota Urban Indian Health, had a very good conversation with them. Going to be meeting with the Link next and following up again with South Dakota Urban Indian Health. I think there's a lot of good conversation there. That group, again, will be coming back to this group. So they're not deciding anything. They're just putting something in a little more package that this group can discuss. So appreciate those who are participating in that and having lots of good conversation there, I expect, over the next month. So today we're going to really drill down and talk about the local shelter capacity and available needs. We're going to get started today with a conversation. First, we're going to give Carrie Benz an opportunity from the county to kind of share what she does. And then again, we'll have open conversation after that, questions for Carrie, and then we'll go to the next one. At the end, we'll have more open discussion flowing as well. But Carrie is really the key leader in our community on a lot of this, the point person for many years, and so she has a lot of historical knowledge and day-to-day leadership as well. So Carrie, if you want to share with us what's going on with the county and your efforts.
Sure. Thank you. Really, I think I just want to start off by just saying that with the county, our role within the community, and I'm sure many of you know that bottom line, our role is to provide for those who are indigent, those who are really struggling and having some tough times, and are there to support our community as a whole in regards to programming and finding ways to meet the needs of those in our community. We certainly are a resource, but we aren't the be-all, end-all. We're not a one pill and we're done type thing. We don't believe in cookie-cutter approach, and so we're always seeking new ideas in order to meet the needs of those that are in our community and all the different subsets that the community has. So at the county, we really have 2 different sets of programming. The first set would be those that we are statutorily obligated to provide in our community. And those are our emergency relief services, which would be things like helping people pay rent if they're having trouble meeting their monthly bills. We assist with medical bills. We assist with, say it's a little bit of dental, medications, funerals, the basic utilities, kind of the basic ways of life that we do assist with. There's an application process. We've gone online now, so people are able to go online and make application to our office. We have 5 emergency relief caseworkers that meet with people, whether it be in person or they take the apps online or do them over the phone. So that's our first set. Our second set is our supportive services. And our supportive services have been services that we've developed over the course of time, knowing that really, for us, we really belong where there are gaps and we don't belong anywhere else. And so we try to fill the holes in the subsets and working with those who they don't really have a program, so to speak, that they really fit into categorically. And so we've developed our Safe Home program, which is on 3rd in Minnesota. That's our 33-bed Housing First program, and that is for males and females who have been chronically homeless and addicted to alcohol. That's long-term housing. They can move into that facility, stay as long as they're willing to abide by the guidelines, and they meet those guidelines and the standards that we ask. Then we also have our Alliance program, which is our jail reentry program. That program works with individuals that have had high recidivism within the jail. And our goal there is to kind of reunify them with the community, get them connected to the right services that provide them the support to optimize their success. And then our third program we have is our Synergy program, which focuses on our homeless families. And there we work with a lot of the individuals that go to the shelters, that also have been in and out of a number of other programs in our community and have oftentimes been unsuccessful in those placements, and so they resume services with us. So all in all, our main office, where there is about 20 of us, and then there's also another 25-ish at Safe Home. So we are a staff of anywhere at any given time between 40 and 45 staff. So our services really are broad. We try to be as broad stroked as what we can. Certainly our services that are statutorily obligated, we have statutes that we have to abide by and live within. So the commission offers us guidance in regards to how flexible we can be. We probably try to bend those as much as we can, but still live within them. As for the supportive programs, those we pretty much write the guidelines ourselves. Trying to stay true really to the county. Our goal is to advocate and empower, certainly hoping to achieve optimal success for anybody that we work with. So that's kind of us in a really broad stroke of a nutshell. I don't want to take up too much time, and if you have questions, I'd rather answer those.
Thank you, Carrie. You always got a lot of stuff going on there. Questions for Carrie, comments? Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Carrie. I always think I know what you do, but then you tell us stuff and I don't. My question is about the county's relationship with places like the Bishop Dudley. There are specific needs there for, and not just for people that are in shelters, but people who maybe need to get their SSI benefits, or they need to find an ID, or those kinds of things. Do your teams go into the Bishop Dudley and other shelters and help with those kinds of things, or how does that work?
Sure. We're an incredibly mobile team. I would say my teams are probably out of the office at least half of the day. We do work with the shelters where they're often. We certainly provide the assistance where we're asked for help. We certainly recognize that each of the shelters have their respective programming, so we try to collaborate with them. But certainly if we're asked to come into the shelter for any given reason, as far as taking applications, assisting with getting those type of items, absolutely, we can be very mobile to do that.
Do I remember from the past, you almost had like an office in that space at the Bishop Dudley?
I don't know if we had an office. We were there a lot. And I think it just depends on what the need is. I know that for a while we did a lot more outreach. It probably decreased over the time when there was COVID. So we didn't do as much outreach during that period of time. But certainly, absolutely, we can be very mobile, especially now that we have our application online. That's something that's really easy to do. We can help apply online, over the phone, on their phones, and so it makes it quite simple.
I apologize, one more if I could. So because when I was taking notes, you do medical bills, dental, medications, funerals, basic utilities, those are all state required.
Yep.
And then the other things are sort of housing related, justice involved, whatever. If I am homeless and one of the barriers it's a common barrier for homeless folks, is that I don't have my social security card. It got lost in the 7 times I've moved in the last 3 years.
Right.
Or I don't have a driver's license. I don't have any proof that I even exist. If I walked into your office, can somebody there help me with that kind of thing? Or is that somebody else that has to do that?
Nope, that's usually us. That's usually us. We walk through that process with people quite often, especially in our supportive services programs. We do that quite frequently.
Okay.
We pay for numerous IDs and help with social security cards, even out of state.
County pays for it, though. Sweet, thanks.
Andy?
Carrie, when you talk about the statutorily obligations, the ones that Michelle just recited, to what degree do you have to meet the needs? Like, do you have kind of a burden to make sure everybody has a place to stay, or you do your best to provide some resources on the edges? How far does that mandate go?
I think, as with any county within the state of South Dakota, when we're given that charge, we certainly do the best that we can, knowing that we have individuals who will be incredibly compliant and willing to work with us, to those who have no interest at all in working with us. So certainly we do what we can. I think certainly are there opportunities for us to try to better engage? We're looking for ways to do that all the time. We do outreach to the parks. We do those type of things to try to encourage people to come in, work with us, at least consider options. But as far as being able to be, to say that we have a definite or a defined number that we have to meet, there really isn't. And I think if you would ask the 66 counties, you're probably going to get 66 different answers. But for us, the leadership prior to myself, Hugh was a firm believer that county was the first stop, and we should be that first stop, to be that priority, to meet the biggest need, and then try to connect from there. So we've kind of continued to fulfill that desire.
Go ahead, Kaden.
Thanks for being here today, Carrie. You mentioned that you have 5 emergency relief case managers. So say they engage with a family that needs help paying rent and utilities to stay housed. What is the process moving forward? Do they get passed on to Synergy so that they can maintain that support and keep that information getting to that family, so that in 3 months they aren't calling you again and saying, hey, we're behind on rent again, we need assistance? Like, what is the support moving forward for these individuals that utilize the emergency services?
So when we have families come into our office, our goal is to do an assessment kind of on the front end as best as what we can. Sometimes they'll start with an ER caseworker. Once the ER caseworker has gotten into the interview to find out, get a better idea and feel for what their situation is, oftentimes they'll determine that this is probably going to be a family that's going to need that additional support far beyond what our emergency relief would provide. So they will immediately make that connection with Synergy. So once Synergy starts with them, they stay with Synergy. Most often, I would say when we get families in, that's the case. If we know that they're homeless, they immediately go to Synergy. So it kind of depends on what their situation is, what their, I guess, how much we feel that they could potentially manage on their own. But most often they get touched by Synergy. Yep.
Go ahead, one more, Heather.
And I'm guessing that's the same for the Alliance program. So those that are really, we're seeing a heavy pattern of recidivism. How are those names coming across your desk? Is that with the jail? Or how are you tracking that, I guess?
Our Alliance program really coordinates significantly with the jail. We have access to the software within the jail, so we're actually able to track who goes in and out of jail, so we have constant communication with them. Those that come across our desk are managed by 2 of the caseworkers or case managers that do constant interaction and interface with the jail. So we're able to monitor who comes in and out, how much, how often, and we meet weekly in a meeting called CART, which is a Coordinated Assessment Reentry Team. And with that team, that's really how we review those that are getting out the next week, what their needs are, who's best to meet with them, because that's a multifaceted team. So we have individuals from across all providing entities. So it might be substance abuse, mental health, medical. We make sure that they get connected to the right provider, and then that provider makes connection with them before they're released, if at all possible. And then from there, we determine who's going to be kind of the long hauler, who's going to make sure that that person gets connected to the right services. So I would say as far as referrals go, it's primarily the jail, but they certainly come from the public defender's office, the public advocate's office. We get COs that do, and then obviously self-referrals. All of the inmates have the ability to go on the kiosk and send us an email, and so we can directly connect with them as well.
Jesse?
So Carrie, we often hear that people are sending their homeless populations to Sioux Falls. Do you, what do you believe to be true, and what are you seeing in your office? Around South Dakota, do you see other communities in South Dakota sending their folks here? And then around the country?
Yes, I see them sending them here within the state. We often have people arrive who have received a bus ticket that may be from their community to here. They may be on their way to actually destination C, but they only get sent here, and then they're sent to our office so that we provide the next leg of the bus ticket. I think as far as an influx within the state, I think there's constant motion, to be truthful. I think there's that population that continually migrates and moves around our state. As for out of state, we've seen a significant increase of arrivals. I would say Texas, California, and New York are probably three of the primaries that we see quite a bit. We've seen a few California. When we've asked why they are they're choosing to come here, a lot of it is it's an open state, so it's freer to do as they choose. They believe that we did right through COVID and remained open. So in states that they've been in, where they've lived, that wasn't the case. So they want to be able to come here and have that opportunity. So do I see a big influx? Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Terry?
Thank you, Carrie. So I recognize the Safe Home program being a approach that supports harm reduction. Mm-hmm. And so I was curious if you could share a bit more about your understanding of harm reduction, why the county supported it, and if there are conversations about growing into that model, because I often hear about the wait list that is there for the Safe House program or other programs like that. So you can confirm, is there a wait list, and is there more conversations about utilizing harm reduction when dealing with this population?
Sure. So I'm going to assume that there's probably at least a portion of this room that well remembers the challenges that we faced when we brought forward the concept of Safe Home. Safe Home is a facility where individuals who have significant addiction to alcohol are allowed to live and continue to use the alcohol as a means of coping in a way of life. What's been challenging is that initially people thought that it was going to become just a flop house, that people were going to party and it was going to be a nightmare, that people weren't going to get well and it was going to be horrible. And in fact, we just had our 10-year achievement of being open, and a decade of making a difference. And it's been a decade of significant challenge, for sure. We've learned along the way, but, and we've learned from those 33 individuals. I think that's where having involvement of those that have lived experience is so critical. We've learned just as much from them as they have from us, I believe. But that facility is a facility where we meet the individual where they are. It's housing first. And so the individual is able to move into our unit, and being able to have a place to call home, to be able to have a place to walk in, close the door, and be safe, have 3 meals a day, not have to wonder where they're going to eat, and also have then the case management piece. And so with that said, once they move in, the challenges continue. I mean, life doesn't just become rosy once they move into safe home. They still have all the significant challenges that they had when they moved in. The difference is we really start working on the harm reduction, which is how do we've had individuals that moved in that were actually taking Pine Sol and filtering that through bread and drinking that, utilizing hand sanitizer. And so we certainly try to migrate off those substances, and even if we can just get them to drink plain beer, that's an accomplishment. So it really is working with that individual to learn better coping strategies, learn how to manage life in a completely different way with different strategies. And over the course of time, it begins to happen. Safe Home is its own community up there. They ironically enough care very much for one another, albeit some days you really can't tell. But they really do a significant service to each other in making sure that they get home. And that really is what it is. It's home. It's not a facility. We've made it a home. We care about them. We celebrate holidays just like we do as a family. And so Safe Home really has been utilized as a tool to provide those 33 individuals the opportunity to feel like they're a human being, that they deserve just as much service and care that any of the rest of us do, and have access to it. And so when you talk about a waiting list, yes, there is a waiting list. Our challenge with that waiting list is obviously that they're very difficult to track. They move frequently. They're on the go quite a bit, so they're a transient population. So are they always around and we're able to find them when we have an opening? No. But we certainly keep them on the list, and we try to keep everybody alert as to who we're looking for if we have an opening. Do I think that people have to wait a long time to get in? I think initially when we first started, that list was much longer. And it was a little more challenging just because we had everybody that was interested. And everybody can be interested until it's time to move in. And then it becomes a real challenge because now we have to sign a lease. It's long-term housing, so for a lot of those individuals, it's signing a lease for the very first time. They've never had an apartment of their own. It's being responsible and accountable. Again, things that challenge that population. So we do have a waiting list, but I don't think it's as long as it used to be. I think at any given time we probably have, I would say, maybe between 10 and 12. So certainly not huge. As far as expanding Safe Home, I've been asked that question a lot. And you know, for as well as it operates and for as much as I have really enjoyed being one of the people that brought that to life, I think our challenge is that we really need to get on the front end of the bus. And by that I mean, you know, we have individuals who have been lifelong consumers. And they are, you know, when you can blow a 0.6 and you're still walking, that's pretty significant. And so I don't know that I would like to see us emulate that for that exact reason. I really would like us to look at how we can expand services on the front end so that we can do interventions sooner, which is why we really developed Alliance. We'd like to get that intervention sooner so that we have youth and that younger population that we can do a better job of connecting with so that we don't have a long list for those that are basically in life and we end up having kind of a hospice situation. So if we could make that happen and get on the front end where we have that opportunity, that would be great.
Thank you. That was good. Yeah, good.
I'm a huge proponent of Safe Home. I love the work there and the mission there, and we definitely celebrated getting a couple of our guys in there when I was at the Bishop Dudley House, so I appreciate that. Are there any parameters for those that are not eligible for Safe Home?
I think probably one of the biggest pieces of us accepting someone at Safe Home really focuses on what their history is and what we believe to be, might be other or better options. You know, Safe Home isn't a fit for everybody. And we're thankful for that, quite frankly. We take in and we work with the individuals who, we have a matrix that we use, and so those that rank high on that matrix, that have high level of need, those are the ones that get in, they're prioritized. It's usually people who have significant medical issues that we know if we don't get in, they're probably not gonna make it. And so we utilize that matrix, we do prioritize that list to the best of our ability. Sometimes we have people who end up in that situation where we end up getting them placed in a nursing home because they really are, they require more care than what we can provide. They do have to be individuals who can care for themselves, take their own shower, be able to kind of basically go through the day fairly independently, but they always do have that case management. So Safe Home is a little bit of a hybrid. If you go around the United States, most programs similar to Safe Home, they make case management optional. When we developed Safe Home, we didn't make it optional. They do have to have case management. In some buildings, they have ovens and stoves. We don't provide that. And many of those programs, they're really challenged when you have the high level of need that our folks do. They've started fires. It just becomes a danger and a hazard. And so we just felt that it was easier to provide them with a microwave, some basic things that they can use. But we provide then those 3 meals a day. So it just makes more sense. It's easier, it's safer. And we know then that they eat because we keep track of that.
Are individuals who have felonies or are on the sex offender registry eligible for Safe Home?
The only individuals that aren't eligible would be those that would be sex offenders, and that's only because it's not a programmatic decision. It was just we were too close to the daycare, and so we weren't able to do that. Otherwise, as far as having any kind of criminal justice activity, pretty much everybody there has been involved with the criminal justice system, not to the level of a lot of felonies. I would say there's probably now, we probably have about 3. But other than that, it would be a lot of the misdemeanors and those that started out probably in the Alliance program and graduated to Safe Home.
Mike will be our final question here, and then we'll move on to the next one, but go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Carrie, you had mentioned that you've hit your 10th anniversary at Safe Home. Congratulations, I guess. On all 3 counts, Safe Home, Alliance, and Synergy, do you have an idea what would be the normal time period each of those would be used by clients on an average?
Sure. Safe Home is ongoing. They can live there as long as they choose. We have some people who have been there almost the whole time. We have some that maybe would have made it. Unfortunately, they've passed, and so they aren't with us anymore. So I would say for the bulk of those folks, they will stay as long as they can. I would say right now, probably the longest that we have now are probably I would say about 8 that are there, that have been there for at least 7 of the 10. For Alliance, there again, it's a program that they're gonna leave us before we leave them. That's kind of the mantra that team uses. We have had people that have been involved with that program for the 9 years that it's been in existence. And then as far as Synergy, we do follow along with families for at least a year. Our challenge is that most often we almost get to a year and the graduation point, and then typically challenges happen for the family. So they end up coming right back into the program. So there's quite a few that we end up working with for multiple years. So it kind of just depends on what their need is, and if we can best meet that need, or if there's another program that we can get them connected to that can do the long haul.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Carrie's not going anywhere, so she'll be available for ongoing conversation. I'm sure some things will circle back after we hear from some others as well and ask some more good questions. So great questions and lots of good information. Next, we wanted to invite back the leadership from Bishop Dudley. We recognize that the conversation we're having about homelessness is a community conversation. We've got a lot of community partners, and as the county, Carrie has already pointed out that she's filling gaps. The only reason there's gaps is because there's other agencies that are doing a lot of good work. We could call forward, again, hundreds of agencies today. Specifically, we did want to invite the Bishop Dudley, as many people obviously talking about Bishop Dudley receive a lot of publicity, and they are at the tip of the spear for our community and leading a community effort broadly. And so asked Madeline to come back today, and thankful for that opportunity. And really, I wanted Madeline to share with us today, saying, what from her perspective can we do as a community to support them with their service to individuals who are chronically homeless? We recognize that the Bishop Dudley is serving a broad spectrum of individuals that need support and stuff. And today we wanted to really ask Madeline to share with us just some understanding of the capacity there, but then specifically any ideas she had, and we could have a conversation as a group of how we could support them in their effort on the chronically homeless front. So Madeline, just the floor is yours to share what you want to share, and then we'll again open it up for conversation and questions. So thanks for coming back.
Sure, thank you for having me. I wasn't quite sure what all you wanted to talk about today, so I did bring just a printout that would show, this is 20 months worth of time at the Bishop Dudley House, and our capacity is 100 beds for individuals. This does not include the families. We have 80 beds for men and 20 beds for women. And over those 20 months, this was from January 2021 through August of 2022, we had 26 nights that we were under that 100 capacity in 20 months. And so our numbers are we're always over capacity, and that is a concern for us. Those are our overnight numbers. That's when people check in and they stay overnight. Our check-in time is from 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m., 7 nights a week. And so you can see this. I think we highlighted, I had some guests help me highlight the nights that we were under capacity, and usually it was only by maybe 1 or 2. Instead of 100 people, we had 97 or 98 or 89 or, just a few under capacity. The nights of 60 guests or 70 guests is long gone. A few years ago, some of those statistics were, in the summertime especially, people would not come into the shelter, or they were transient over the summer. They would leave town. They're not leaving, and we have more and more people all the time. And so we are seeing them 12 months a year. So that overcapacity was something new just a few years ago, to be over 100 guests in the summertime, June, July, and August. One of the other issues is that we had the fire marshal come in and put an absolute maximum capacity on the Bishop Dudley House, and that is now 155 individuals, again, not including our families, and that is what's mostly concerning us. So I also went through, and your sheets are not marked, but for that same 20-month period, we had 30 nights where we had over 155 individuals. And if you see on your, I know it's in black and white, this printout, if you just look at 100 as our capacity, and you can see how we're well over that, but if you look at 150, if you just go 5 more people, it's about 30 nights over 20 months. So it's not hugely critical, but we need to know on those 30 nights, what do we do with those extra people? And that's a real concern for us. We need to have some way of referring them to some other facility. We struggle to staff the Bishop Dudley House. I know that there are lots of businesses in Sioux Falls and surrounding communities that are having difficulty getting employees. And those are businesses where people work 8 to 5. It's really difficult to staff a homeless shelter where we have people who are, could be intoxicated, who have major mental health issues, and they're working from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. or from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. And so these are very, very challenging jobs. And then when we have, 10 or 20 or 50 extra people, some nights we had 80 or 90 extra people, it's difficult. It's difficult to place them, and then when they get there, we don't have enough mats. And so those are some of the things that we really need to have this task force look at, is we are not the only homeless shelter in town, and we need help. We do need help figuring out where we can refer others when we are full. Because up until we had that fire marshal come in, we were just taking them all. Because it's really difficult to turn someone away when it's 20 degrees outside or 10 below and say, you can't stay in here tonight. Well, where am I going to go? Well, I don't know. We don't have an answer where you're going to go. So we had to let them in. And that is a challenge. And our staff cannot be the ones at the gate that say, no, you're number 156, you can't come in tonight. Because for too many people, that's a death sentence if the weather is inclement. So that's a really big challenge. We serve about 100 to 120 people lunch every day. We're always looking for volunteers to come in and help us serve that lunch. We don't have a huge staff for the number of people who are coming in and out of our building. We always hear about the people who are staying overnight. We are basically at what I refer to as a community center for our neighborhood. We have people who come in every single day. They don't stay at the Bishop Dudley House. They're not homeless. They are lonesome. They don't have air conditioning. They come in, they have their own place to live, but they turn to the Bishop Dudley House to have lunch, have companionship, to come in and see what kind of resources we have available. We have, haircuts. We have people that come in and do free haircuts. Anyone can come in and do their laundry for free. They just have to sign up. Anybody can come in, take a shower. We have a case manager. Just until the last couple of weeks, we have added a case management coordinator. It's some of the greatest challenges out there is that it's difficult to hire caseworkers and case managers. And then once we have one, she is bombarded. And then our family coordinator left and took another position. So now this individual had 150 to 160 individual guests, as well as 7 families at any given time, that they're trying to help provide resources for and get those Social Security cards, those driver's licenses, ID cards, so that people can go and get to work, because without those basic necessities, they cannot get a job. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I can just keep talking.
Go ahead.
Hey, Madeline. Thanks for being here today. Are you seeing the same trends that Carrie is seeing with indigent community members coming from out of state and landing at the Bishop Dudley House?
We see some, yes. We've had people fly in who are wheelchair bound from Miami because they saw on an advertisement for South Dakota where, like Carrie said, we're free and open, and there were no COVID restrictions, and so people were coming here, especially over COVID. We saw that a lot. I don't think we have seen that quite as much because people are pretty savvy. We get a lot of emails and a lot of telephone calls, and mostly emails to our info@BDHH that I'm coming that way and I need a place to stay and we're over capacity. You may have a place to stay, you may not. You cannot count on it, and if you're here, you may get a mat on the floor, you may not even get a mat. And so we are very honest and open to people who email us and say, if you have a family, our family rooms are full and we do not keep a waiting list, because people are very optimistic. If you tell someone that, yeah, our family rooms are full, we have 7 family rooms, and they'll say, okay, well, we might just stay in our van for the next 10 days, or surely it won't be that long. Well, some of our families are really, really difficult to house for all kinds of reasons. And so they might be there 3 months or 6 months. So we don't keep a waiting list for families because we don't want them to stay in a bad situation, an unsafe situation, while they think that they can get a place at the Bishop Dudley House.
Counselor Subbard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here again, Madeline. So remind me again, so you've got 80 rooms for men, 20 for women?
80 beds.
80 beds.
One
Okay.
room, 80 beds.
That's what I was going to say. I was trying to put together how many were in a room if there were rooms, and I remembered, okay. So when you say 155 can be there at one time, so you'll put mats around wherever you can put a mat down? That's how you get the extras in there? And what is the number where you just absolutely cannot let somebody else in?
The fire marshal tells me it's 155. So that's the number. When they say number 155 is checked in, that number 156 is not to come in. That's the capacity. Now, we didn't have that exact number until late last spring or late winter. We had the fire marshal come in because our board of directors was concerned. When we had 190 or 192 guests come in and we have 3 or 4 overnight staff, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to handle. And so we had to find out what our maximum capacity was. So the fire marshal came in, did a tour. They had a meeting. I think they talked to, it was Dean Lanier, and came in and said, the report said 155.
Yeah, I can't even imagine being the one who has to tell 156 you can't come in. What do you have for staff again? How big is your staff?
We have about 20, which day is it? We have anywhere between 25 and 28 to 29 staff, full and part-time. Turnover is incredibly high. We just hired, I think our operations manager offered 9 people jobs, and 4 showed up and 2 stayed. It's not an easy place to work. But our guests deserve the best. These are human beings. These are citizens of our community. They have families who care deeply about them. They have families who love them. And there's just a lot of families that cannot take care of their loved one because of their addiction and mental health challenges. And there is really no other place who's going to take someone when mom and dad decide to drop off their 27-year-old son.
Thank you.
Rebecca?
Do you keep statistics on average length of stay? Is it something that people are using as a housing option as opposed to a temporary shelter? And how do you
Yes.
address those if it is?
Well, actually, yes, all of those. We do have length of stay. If you look in that, for that 20 months, the average stays per night was 124 nights. We do have people who are basically living at the Bishop Dudley House because of the lack of affordable housing and the lack of housing for people who have felonies or who have our sex offender status. There is nowhere for these folks to go. And we are always full in our family rooms because there is just a lack of affordable housing for families as well. And so we do keep all of these statistics. We know exactly who stayed every night and how many nights they stayed, going all the way back.
What does that case management then look like for an individual that is staying there, an entire year? What does that look like for them?
Well, we call Carrie a lot. We're like, what can we do with this person? What can we do with this person? What can we do with this person? And there's just a lot of people who are stuck in this limbo. There are no options for them. There is nowhere for them to go. We had a veteran in our facility for 586 nights. It was awful. She had no business being housed at a homeless shelter for 586 nights, but she did not fit any criteria for any help from anywhere.
Terry, we're going to come back to you, Michelle, in a second.
Being a member of this task force, this is the one statement, Madeline, that you made that just continues to torment me, being that you don't know what to do with your 156th guest. And it's not your fault, but I am struggling to sleep imagining what it would be like to be in your position or your staff's position. And I'm just curious if any ideas have been presented to you, your team, or your board in regards to what to do with that 156th guest. And I heard you say that we will have an opportunity as a task force to explore some of that, and I look forward to digging deeper and making suggestions of my own. But I'm just curious, in your position, has anybody brought you ideas of what to do with your 156th guest?
No. I don't know what to do. That's going to be a challenge in itself, and it's not just going to be 156, it's going to be up to 170 or 180 because of the weather. So it has to be, and you can see on that sheet, I know it's not a pretty spreadsheet, it's ugly, but you can see the numbers. Those numbers don't lie. You know, we have to figure out what to do with those folks on those nights.
Michelle?
Well, I started out with a specific question, and then you talked about a veteran, and there are supposed to be no homeless veterans, period, end of statement. And I was looking over my notes before I came today, and Clarence Koister was here a couple weeks ago and said, veterans, you know, we've got a place for them. And you're telling me that's not true, that there, at least in this community, there are veterans who are homeless.
Yes, there are homeless veterans, but Michelle, you have to remember, people can choose that as well. You have to be careful on pointing fingers at others because, you know, not everyone will sign on the dotted line because they have a mental health issue that does not allow it. So that's where we need to have these people someplace that they can get treated for mental health issues. We're not that. We're not a healthcare facility. We are not trained in healthcare. We are a homeless shelter, and we keep people alive day by day by day. That's our job. Keep them in, get them in so that they don't become victims outdoors, so that they do not freeze, so they don't get hit by cars. How many times do we hear that in our community? Way too often. And so we have to have open doors and open arms to people who come to us so that we can just keep them safe for that night.
Mm-hmm. Right. So 2 other questions. One, how many of the folks that are living at the Bishop Dudley are working at least part-time?
We have, I'm trying to get to that number. From what I can tell on our nightly reports, it's about 40% of our guests who stay at the Bishop Dudley House are working full or part-time or some sort of day labor, which may not be an everyday type of situation. But many of our guests work at the Sanford Premier Center, they work the concerts, they work all the events, so they're coming back late at night. And we have to guarantee those people a bed because we know that they're out working, and so that figures into that 156. We have a work verification form, and so we have all of those folks in a file, and we know when they're coming in and when they're coming back.
Good, thank you. And then one other thing, I told you this story. I want people to hear this because this is part of what I'm seeing we need to take care of. I spent some time at the McDonald's in your neighborhood recently talking to a couple of people from the neighborhood, and conveniently, a fight broke out in the parking lot while we were sitting there. And so as this McDonald's staff responds to the fight, and the person I'm with who lives in that neighborhood just automatically calls 911 and describes everything that's going on, I asked the McDonald's manager to come over and just answer a couple questions. The first thing she said to me, because I asked, how often does this happen? A couple times a week, because the shelters kick them out, is what she said to me. I know that to not be true, at least in 2 cases of the shelters that I know of, but would you talk about, I'm just going to say it, people's rights when it comes to staying at the Bishop Dudley and participating at the Bishop Dudley? And then again, that, there's that time period where you do check in and then you do make people go eat. Would you talk about that? Do you kick people out, and what does that really mean?
No. So I know there's a lot of miscommunication or misinformation about our hours at the Bishop Dudley House. We are open from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. We are a day shelter, and we're open 365 days a year. We serve lunch Monday through Friday at 11:30 a.m., and on the weekends, we serve an early dinner at 3:30 p.m. And so we serve a meal every day, and we're open. We're open on Saturdays and Sundays. We have a wake-up call at 6. It starts at 6. Imagine getting 150 people out of bed every morning, especially some of those who are going to work and get in late. So we have people who are, they're getting up, they want to take a shower, they're getting ready for work, and we ask everyone to be out of our building Monday through Friday. This includes the families, so that they can go over and get breakfast at the banquet. The banquet serves from 7 until 8. We are closed from 7 until 8. We are closed when the banquet is serving dinner. So they do have a place to go. And so then we open our doors back at 6:30, again, 6:30 p.m., and that's when we do the check-in process. It's done electronically, and we do take volunteers if anyone would like to come and help anybody who's watching. We always need volunteers for check-in, and that is a greeting. You greet people as they come in. Check-in is from 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. And so then people are doing their laundry, they're taking showers, they're getting ready for bed, they're reading a book, they're doing whatever. And our day room is now closed. It is not open. It's only the overnight rooms. So our day room is open during the day. Our night room is open at 6:30 until 7 a.m. So we are there. Our staff is always there. There's somebody there 24 hours a day. On the weekends, the individuals, we ask them to go, because then they can go eat breakfast at the Union Gospel Mission they serve. The families, they do not have to leave. They get to stay in, and we have it staffed so that the families do not have to leave on the weekends in the morning. So they can be there 24/7 from Friday night until Monday morning.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Michelle, thank you for asking that question, because that is a huge misconception in our community, that there's no place for folks to go during the day, which nothing could be further from the truth. And so I think we need to continue to tell what we are at the Bishop Dudley House and what we aren't. And thank you so much for asking that question, because it's really important. And we're very concerned about our staff having to tell that 156th person, Terry. We haven't had to do that yet, and I hope we don't have to do it, but I'm very fearful for them, because they don't come to work there to tell people that they can't come in. If you're going to come to work at the Bishop Dudley House, it's because you have a heart for people, and if you have to be the person that turns them away, that's gut-wrenching. I know it's gut-wrenching for our staff. It is gut-wrenching for the board. I can tell you, we just don't have the answers. And so, we're hoping for some divine intervention about what our next options are going to be.
Madeline, I'd just like to hear your perspective for a moment on, let's just say we were putting a finite amount of dollars to work, and we had to make a decision of where to put them to work. I mean, one option is the Salvation Army type shelter scenario that you make available for 4 months out of the year. I'm not proposing that, I'm just sharing that as an option. Another thing that I'm hearing is this pinch point of housing for individuals in that first step out of the Bishop Dudley and other agencies in that 30 to 60% AMI area, which we're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks. If the city was to make an investment from your perspective, $1 million more, would you say, hey, let's plow into creating more housing units, 30 to 60% AMI, and try to get that funnel a little bit bigger up there? Or would you say, hey, this is emergent, we need that $1 million plowed right now into another shelter option immediately? I'm just not right or wrong, just asking for your perspective of someone who's on the ground every day.
I think we need, because of our population, we need, if you're going to build another apartment complex, there are so many people who can't afford to move out, or they're all doubled up. Those families are going to get those, or those individuals are going to get those low-income housings first. Because if you have a choice to rent to somebody who's been staying at their cousin's house or their grandma's or with their parents, they're going to probably get those apartments. We need emergent housing. It needs to be, because many of our guests are mentally ill and chronically addicted. And that kind of housing is not the answer for them. We need another safe home. We need a safe home that has case management like this one, but it has to be for people who suffer from mental illness with some case management. It's very difficult for landlords, and I don't know if you've talked to property owners, it's difficult when people go off their medications, and it can be difficult for other tenants who live in those same buildings. And so it's very difficult to house people who suffer from mental illness. They struggle to stay on their medication. They struggle with addiction on top of that. And so we need some kind of facility or a home, group homes, I don't know what the answer is, with someone there who could provide case management, and these people have a room that they can call their own. That would help this situation, because many of these guests are terrified to live by themselves. We have had so many people transition out of Bishop Dudley House who if you even bring it up that, hey, we're finding an apartment, we've got an apartment for you, their anxiety goes through the roof. They start pulling at their hair, they bite their nails, they are scared to death to go out on their own, and because they have health issues, they have chronic health issues. One guest said has kidney dialysis every day, and she said, what's going to happen to me if I live alone? What's going to happen to me? These are the people that need to live in a group home setting. And she got her apartment. We said, you have to leave for 30 days. You can't come back. You can't come back and use the Bishop Dudley House's lunch or a crutch. You need to learn how to live alone. Get a cat. She came back on day 31. She came back for lunch. Didn't see her again because she was out for 30 days and thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I lived there for a year and a half, you know. Once they get out there and they know they can do it, we need to have help to help these people learn, and that's through mentorship. We need somebody to make a connection with our guests, and it has to be one-on-one. We couldn't hire enough case managers to help all of these people. There's not a magic number. Their fears of moving out and being alone and learning how to live on their own with mental illness and addiction are like moving mountains. They can't even think about living on their own. And so that's what we need. We need group homes or some kind of facilities where people can have a room, a dormitory, where they have different floors and different rooms, where they just have a small room to themselves, much like the safe home.
Thank you. appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And we'll have more conversation with Madeline in the weeks ahead as well. We want to make sure we leave enough time for other guests as well. So thank you so much. Next up today, we have got with us the Helpline leadership. Helpline is kind of a beautiful combination of everything we've already talked about, probably, in that they're the glue that brings a lot together. But I thought it was really important for us to hear from them, is that many people maybe don't think of the Helpline when they think of the homeless population in our community, but the Helpline is deeply engaged in helping us care for people. And so I want to make sure that we're not developing new systems, but we're strengthening existing systems and understanding the systems that are in place. So Janet's going to kind of give us a high-level overview, and then we'll open it up for discussion just like we have been doing. Janet, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rich, and I'm happy to be back again with you. I was here a couple weeks ago, kind of gave you some numbers about the Helpline Center, talked a little bit about the network of care. So was invited to come back and share a little bit more information about network of care. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of slides that has information about that, if we can figure out how to make it advance. There we go. Thank you. So as I covered the last time I was here, the purpose of the network of care is building a coordinated social service system that's providing those needed services to individuals and families in the most efficient, effective, and caring manner that we possibly can. We want to provide that data, that analysis designed to help the community serve those in need and to help make effective referrals for those individuals. So this is just a little graphic to kind of talk about that person who is in need of care. Obviously, there's lots of needs, as we've talked today, that an individual may have, whether that's housing, food, transportation, counseling, whatever the case may be. So the network of care supports those connections and coordinations through technology. So it is very much a software system that allows those connections to happen to effectively help that person get connected to the resources that they need to be stabilized or wherever they're at in their journey. So it's very much, you'll see the whole person or the whole picture of what is happening with that person. And what the system also does is provide that streamlined kind of communication between those providers, helping the providers, which we have many fantastic, wonderful providers in this community, talk and communicate with each other in a coordinated fashion to best help that person in need, to kind of have a ongoing look at where that person is at and where they have been and where they need to go from here. So the network of care, confidentiality is a huge issue for us. So I'm not going to go through all these 12 bullet points of how we ensure confidentiality, just to let you guys know that, of course, we have our individual clients signing releases of information. We have all of our partner agencies signing MOUs with us. And the newest thing that's happened is our software system will be fully HIPAA compliant in the next month, in this fall. So because we've had so many providers who have come to us who are those healthcare providers who that is something they have required and requested, is for the system to be HIPAA compliant. So we have moved in that direction, so to better meet the need in the community for that. So as we look where we're at right now, this is our current list of partner agencies. So you can see it's a variety of social service agencies that serve individuals generally with basic needs. That's what we're sort of focused on when we're talking about the network of care. So through July of 2022, so this is just 6 months of data that we've provided. Almost 4,000 services have been documented and provided within that system, and then there's been over 1,000 referrals that have made within that system. So I know Rich invited us to come talk about looking at the individuals who your conversation is about, those individuals who are homeless or who potentially could become homeless. How could the network of care system better help? And how could we help solve some of those problems? So we need to look from where we're at right now to where we can be in the future. And that's really going to be where the conversation goes next, on the steps we need to take to expand and build on the network of care that we already have in place. So I've invited Betsy, who is our Vice President of Program Development, to come up and share a little bit more about that.
Thank you for inviting us today. I think from the expansion potential of the network of care is some key points that I really drive our work forward. Is 7 years ago, Janet and I were at a national conference as these systems started to develop, and one of the speakers said, a person in crisis is a really bad historian. And that is a lot of what's happening, is they have to remember who they talk to, what's happening, who's waiting for what document. And so that really drives how can we provide a technology structure to help the frontline providers, because we cannot ever take away the human connection, but how can we better support through technology? And so when we look at the expansion potential, is one is to add more providers to the network. And so we have those current providers. We're working very closely with Bishop Dudley Hospitality House as well with their software and working on how can we integrate it. I think when someone hears about the network of care, they might automatically jump to one software. Well, that's unrealistic. Not every provider in our community can use one centralized software. So when the network of care started in 2015 through Community Conversations, we did pick a software. In 2021, the pandemic had us reevaluate many things. And we realized we needed a more versatile software. So we went through a huge software transition in 2021 to have a more flexible software that we can integrate. So I think as we talk about adding more providers to the network, it's also meaning integrations with current providers. Not saying every provider has to use one software, but how can systems talk together to keep this continuity of care for the clients, to serve them more efficiently. So if they talk to agency A and then they go to agency B, we can carry that conversation forward to make sure they're not falling through the cracks. So that goes to universal case coordination notes as another expansion. A key piece to the network is each partner agency still has the autonomy of being their own agency. And so there's things locked down in the system that only that agency can see, which is critical to that autonomy. But what are the components of increasing that universal coordination? So wherever they touch the system, our amazing service providers on that front line can carry that conversation. And also a real-time understanding where the person is housed. Right now, we work with St. Francis House, Bishop Dudley Hospitality House. We're in conversations and we support their software as well. But is there a potential to open that up to understand where the other housing opportunities are and where people can find vacancies more efficiently? And the final piece is the external referral into the coordinated HCNC system. So is there a way that a partner can provide a referral as a touch point that we can continue that navigation, realizing that not one agency is going to solve this, all of us together have to. So the baseline of that network of care is really providing that technology infrastructure to empower and the human connection through our amazing service providers on the front line.
Great. Questions, discussion, comments, helpline team?
How does one become an agency partner with you, is my first question. My second question is, do you see any gaps in services offered by the agency partners? So I saw the furniture mission is on there, so furniture is covered, right? Is there anything that is not being covered that you hope to bring on board in the future?
So to become a partner agency, we really in 2021 didn't add any on purpose because we were doing a major software transition. So right now our team is starting to meet with agencies, and so it's really a discovery process of what their needs are. Some of our partner agencies didn't have a software, so they were using pencil and paper. So it's also helping them increase their ability. So we first do a discovery process with them to say, and also make sure that they understand that we're not just a software provider. You have to participate in the network of sharing that information and the referrals. There is some cost involved from an end user perspective, so we need to be upfront to say, here's the cost involved to cover those end users, because as Janet mentioned, that confidentiality is so huge. So every single person that has access has to be a named end user. We don't do general logins because that confidentiality is so critical because of the people we're serving. And so once through that discovery process, we really move forward from there and look at, is it a fit, and continue forward. I think with gaps served, we've really focused initially on the basic needs, making sure those basic needs are covered. Now, there's a lot more partner agencies in there serving that we could add, and so I think it's really looking at basic needs, I think, initially, but going from there. There's definitely some behavioral health, mental health programs we're in conversations with, and that's a key piece to add that HIPAA compliancy piece of that to that software. Not that we want medical records stored in there by any means, but how do we bring them into the fold to be able to help navigate those social services for the patients they're working with?
Yeah, I have one more. Sorry, Rich. So does 211 feed directly into this? So if an individual calls 211 for the first time, are they given their own profile? Yeah.
Not directly, but that's in progress.
Okay.
So we are working on that coordination, because I will tell you, Terry, we are, in the winter, we get many of those calls on 211 in the middle of the night families, and we are very concerned because those, just as Bishop Dudley's staff see those individuals face to face, we hear that on the phone. And so we have an amazing coordination with county emergency on-call, but we are concerned on what happens this winter.
Moment of quick chair privilege before I take the next question. Would you be willing to share with us the cost of the end user?
Yes. So we, it's $30 per end user at the moment, but with the HIPAA, it will be $40 per end user is what we're expecting. We have to go through all the final costs, but.
$40 a month, a year?
Per month, yep, per month,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you. Other questions?
And then there's administrative costs to the system that the Helpline Center works to secure through fundraising and grants and donations.
I just assume you guys have cash on the trees to take care of that. So. Andy?
You know, at the stages when you were adding new organizations to the network, what were the obstacles that you were hearing from them about making the decision to join? Was it just needing to know more? Was there consistent themes that you're hearing? What are some of the challenges to expanding this to more agencies?
The cost, most likely, because nonprofits have limited funds, and a lot of nonprofits, they're very interested, but then when it's per user, that changes the conversation. So the cost has been our largest barrier on that conversation.
And that's the ongoing cost, not like a startup cost?
There is some startup costs. Sometimes that depends on how intense of the build they want us to do in our staff capacity from an administrative side.
I would just add to that, there are some other barriers other than cost. Cost is probably the one that we hear the most. But we, as I mentioned with the confidentiality, we do have each partner agency sign an MOU that's pretty extensive. And so we have had some pushback or obstacles from some of our agencies because they've been reluctant to sign that MOU. So I think Michelle asked me the last time if we had barriers with government organizations. And we have had success as we've expanded the network of care to both Brookings County and Cottington County. Both of their county governments have signed the MOU. We've made a slight modification to that MOU that met their needs, and so they were able to join the network.
Can you move your slides back one so we can look at that list again? So my question is about those folks that are, I mean, one, when you talk about an end user, let's make sure we understand that that's, if my agency has 5 staff and I have 5 people I want to be able to use that, it's $40 per month, right?
Correct, per person, yep.
Okay, and then have you found concerns among those folks who now have profiles in the system? Does that bother them?
No, we've had relatively little pushback from any of the individuals that are in the system or used the system. Quite honestly, I think they feel like we were already doing that we were already communicating and sharing information with each other. And I think they see the positive end result that this is going to better help their situation and prevent them from having to tell their story multiple times over and over again. So I think they see the benefit of it.
I love that line about how a person in crisis is not a good historian. That's exactly it. I know early on in the conversations you were talking about kind of an ID card that would go with each person. Has that developed, or is it you just go by?
We did a small pilot with that, and we found that wasn't the most effective way of operating the system, so we've moved away from that. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Terry?
When looking at the slide for partner agencies and then the the infographic with surrounding the person with all those needs and stuff, like, it's really comforting to see like places like Furniture Mission and mental health support and counseling and stuff come into place. But what I noticed that is still a pretty huge gap is the housing, and that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, you see places like the Francis House on there or the Bishop Dudley, but what I'm curious about in regards to bringing in more agencies on there. So, for example, I'm familiar of other housing options, but they're not on this list. I'm thrilled to see the community outreach on the list as a member of the board and knowing we have Hezekiah House and also the One Roof program, but I'm also familiar with other faith-based initiatives like through Celebrate and their Celebrate Freedom program, or what Central Church does and some of their revitalizations. What is the gap between these other housing-based options, maybe even individual landlords who are open to helping people in emergent situations? I'm seeing a gap from other housing initiatives and individuals and wondering what's missing there to bring them online with the system.
I think some of it is what we referenced before, the expense, the cost for the individual organization. If they're small organizations, sometimes they see that as a barrier and they're not prepared to either pay the startup costs or the ongoing costs, or both of those. And some of them, I think it's just that we haven't connected with them. You know, we certainly know that they're out there through our resource database, but we haven't made that connection specifically for this program for Network of Care.
Thank you.
Rebecca?
Just a point of clarification on that. If they're not on the Network of Care, they still could be in the 211 database.
Absolutely.
And if someone calls for housing, they may give them.
Correct.
It's just that Central Church wouldn't be able to pull up the Network of Care and find out that they've been to 3 other agencies within the last month, correct?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Rebecca. Okay. That is correct.
Mike?
One of the concerns that I have one of your handouts, paper handouts from 2015. It's about that thick. I'll have to admit that I was the culprit that came down and had you people print out a bunch of them, and now the thing's about that thick. One of the things that was very glaring to me when I went through it was that it was 89 pages long, and pages 41 through 81 were all for-profit counseling services. And I guess what we're looking at, although counseling is a specific portion of what we have to deal with, is, you know, we're looking at what could be done nonprofit-wise, maybe assisting you, maybe assisting someone else, but still in all. That kind of stood out to me. Could you give me your response on that?
Sure. So I believe Shanice, our database manager, worked with you, Mike, to kind of put that list together. So our resource database has over 5,000 agencies and programs. So there's a lot of information in there. And it really depends what resources you're looking to pull out of there. We can really customize that to a certain degree, anything that you ask. So specifically talking about mental health resources, though, we do have for-profit providers and nonprofit providers for mental health care. And the primary reason for that is to give our callers a choice. Certainly, we want to make sure that they have every option available to them. And so oftentimes our conversation is going to involve if cost is a barrier for them. Do they need a sliding fee scale? Do they need somebody who accepts insurance, whatever the case may be? So that is part of the conversation when we work with referrals on that. But if they're looking for a very specific type of provider and cost is not a barrier, we want to make sure we have that within our resource database to provide. So it's rare that somebody will sit down and print out the whole list like you did, Mike, but that's okay though. But so most of the time it's not that overwhelming to the person. We'll try to narrow it down for them and help them make that selection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the helpline leadership? Go ahead, Annie.
Hi. Okay, so for domestic violence agencies, they would not participate in that, correct?
In the network of care?
Yeah.
That is correct. They generally across the country have made a decision not to.
Okay. And then for some of the barriers that some agencies have expressed would be because they already have multiple databases that they have to enter information in. Is that like kind of rare, like there's not a whole ton of, or is that more widespread?
You know, I think it's a little bit what Betsy talked about when we're talking about what the solution is that some agencies don't have a software system, so we can provide that to them. Some agencies do, so we have to provide whatever that connection is, like an API that can feed data into the system that we have. And so I think that's really the conversation we have to have with them and not look at that as a barrier that they're already using a different system, because that's okay.
Do we know anything about how much API would be to connect like a majority of databases?
Yeah, Betsy, you can share.
That is a loaded question. And so here, from our perspective, we picked a software where we have an open API. So we have Alex, our integration manager, can build open APIs to deliver our data. The challenge is the API to receive it is up to that software company's. So we're trying to work on a certain integration right now, and we're waiting for a quote back from that software on what the cost is to receive our API. So there's not a clear cut. There's some also softwares, depending on how old the software is, that don't even have an API set up. So then we're looking at, can we do a secure file upload overnight? Can we do a data dump? And so all of those have different costs, but it's really, our cost is fairly minimal with this new software that we chose because of that reason. So it's really the cost on the software we're trying to connect with and what that cost is by their developer or their team.
Have you gotten any estimate on that? Like if you had one agency you were working with at all, like any idea of how much?
Well, it's all depending if their API is open so you can build it, or if you have to pay for the engineer time. So it could be anywhere from 5,000 to 150,000 times. So it's really software by software, and who has to do the building? Do you have to pay the developer to do the building, or do you have someone on site if you have access to an open API? Our previous software did not give us access to the API, so hands down, it would probably have been 30,000 per integration for us. And that's why this new software, it changes our position from a network, but we still have to work with that other software we're trying to connect with and that cost. And even if they have API ability.
Thank you.
Technology 101.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Thanks, Helpline. All right, a lot of good information again today in a variety of fronts, and I think we've dug another level of detail down on various items as well. One of the items today that we're not going to have an opportunity to talk in detail about just because we're not quite there yet, but opportunities for housing families and potential ideas. Some of you are maybe aware, we know the whole community is aware, that most recently the Children's Inn is in the process of moving to a new facility which will create an opening at their existing facility. Not available today yet. There are a variety of agencies that are in conversation about appropriate use of the existing Children's Inn facility and the potential of purchasing it, establishing programs there, potentially for families as well. Carrie from the county obviously is staying close in those conversations. I was able to learn a little bit more last week, but we want an opportunity over the next 2 weeks to really learn some more and allow those agencies that are exploring that to talk with us further. So we didn't think it was appropriate today to dig into that when those agencies themselves maybe haven't had the opportunity yet as boards and leaders. We don't want them hearing that from us rather than those agencies and organizations. So do want to let you know that that idea is being explored in the community. Again, this is a community conversation. We would expect over the next couple of weeks some of those conversations to come back here and influence some of our ideas and thinking. So that's what's going on that front. Wanted everybody to be well aware of those conversations as well. So what I wanted to do next, open discussion on next steps. This could just go a bundle of different directions. And so what I was thinking we could do next is, this might be uncomfortable for everybody, so you can throw your tomatoes and walk out if you don't want to do this. But I was thinking that each of us take like a minute and a half, and we just kind of said, hey, here's what I'm hearing, here's what I'm thinking of process, or here's what I want to learn more about after today. So as we process the information we've received up to this point, specifically on this issue of shelter capacity, available needs for that shelter thing, what are you thinking about? What would you like to learn more about? Just kind of go around and everybody just take a moment and share something that they're thinking about, would like to learn more about. We'll get all that information on the table of where we reach out individually and then try to pinpoint our way moving forward. So who would be willing enough to be bold enough to get us started on that? I realize I'm just dropping it right now, but Michelle seems like she started. She already has notes. I did not give her a heads up about this. So Michelle, you want to get us started? Then
I would love to do that. Thank you. And no, he didn't give me a heads up. I just, as I've been thinking through this process, and I have taken liberty of meeting with some of those folks who have been in our meetings previously. I said I was at the McDonald's for a while, and I need to see stuff, and that's how I process. So I did make a note to myself. For me, there's really three main issues. The first one I've talked about already is messaging. We cannot ever stop talking about and sharing the news of what it means to be homeless in this community and the opportunities that we have for services. That Madeline didn't use the words today, but it is not illegal to be homeless. You have a right to be homeless. You have a right to be on the street. And so we need to understand as a community what that means. And then another friend of mine who's not here tonight either, but often says to me that we have to decide as a community what we're willing to tolerate. So that to me all fits into a package that I'm calling messaging. And then I see two other main issues. One is that there is a handful of very visible panhandlers who are not breaking the law. They just happen to be all in one place. And they tend to be, there's about 30 of them is my understanding. I have the data here somewhere. 10 of them are frequent flyers at the link. They are well known to all of the folks that are in this industry. And to me, that's really low-hanging fruit. And the response to that low-hanging fruit is exactly what has been said 2 or 3 times here. It is called housing first. We get them into a place where they can survive. And the safe home is an example. I also hear, and I've read all the testimony, that we don't want it right there. We don't want it right downtown. We don't want it in the same corridor. But we have to, as a community, decide that housing first is the most important piece of how we manage that small group of very visible people. That's my note.
Thank you. Who else would be willing to share kind of where they're at, what they're processing? Andy?
I have very non-fully formed ideas here, so I would echo housing first. I think if we could look to the people that Madeline sees day after day and find a different place to care for them, that would help the overnight numbers, and it'd certainly help a lot of lives. I'm struck with how many different entities provide case management, and I know Madeline and I have talked about the need for ID cards, and I know of at least 3 places that do that. And I know that is hard work and hard to coordinate, but I just wonder about the ability to use technology if we had more participants to coordinate those types of things. And then I just the piece that I'm kind of struggling with is that we're over capacity at some places and under at others when we're having fairly similar services offered. And I think in the short run, we have to have conversations about why are there empty beds some places and people that could be turned away at others. And I think that might be us. It's hard to do that if you're running an organization and trying to have partnerships, but I think that's a conversation we have to continue to have because we've got a problem coming in about 2 months. There's a lot of talk of collaboration and willingness, but it seems like one place in town has to carry the water for all of these people that don't have a place to be. And so I think we need to keep having that discussion as well.
Thank you. Other reflections, perspectives? Terry, go ahead.
Mine are not fully formulated either, but I'll go ahead and spill them here. My heart and head is continuing to empathize with Madeline, Jesse, and the Bishop Dudley House, and spending time imagining solutions for guest 156. And I just want to be a part of that. I mentioned I have some ideas. I got some thoughts. I think that the team at the Bishop Dudley should hear them. I think we should advocate for them, because if we have no options, then any option, it's better than no option at this point. And so my heart is just really wanting to meet with you, Madeline, meet with the members of your board, and start to imagine what type of creative solutions can we come up with in that case. Additionally, I think there's some opportunities too at the Bishop Dudley to continue to build into your culture. You've done a great job there in bringing in more activities and doing cultural things there, culture-based stuff there. But I do recognize that there's more opportunity there to develop an even stronger culture, particularly as it pertains to developing peer accountability, peer ambassadors, and really not relying completely on your staff to be the solution. That within the population of the homeless in transition, there's potential there to have leadership be developed from within the community. And it's an approach called fostering a therapeutic community. It's a whole science and research, and I've been studying it for years, and I would love to be able to have the opportunity to talk with you about what does it look like to design a therapeutic community for that population of people, that the people that are there at the Bishop Dudley could have a even better experience, but then also those that you don't have the space for have some options as well when capacity dictates you have to turn them away.
Thank you. Any other council, any other task force members, something perspective? Rebecca?
I can jump in here a little bit. I think one of the things that strikes me is there is not going to be one solution that's going to fix all of this. Each time we hear about a different program or a different situation, we seem to be talking about different populations of people. We have individuals who have mental health needs. We have individuals that have chronic alcohol or substance abuse issues. We've got others that are maybe temporarily without housing because of circumstances or financial difficulties. And so I think if we're going to try and tackle this as a one solution, we're going to fail at our efforts. I think we need to have, like we have been, a good understanding of what are all the services, but then there needs to be kind of this continuum of services and making sure we're matching up individuals with the service that's right for them, not just matching them to wherever there's an opening, you know, hey, go here, oh, you need another, okay, go here, but really doing a good job on that front end, matching them up with the program that's going to best fit their needs, so that hopefully we can reduce the number of agencies that person has to touch. And then that coordination of services, I think, is a huge piece of that. We have a lot of agencies doing a lot of great things, but I feel like there is a lack of coordination, and leads to some of that bouncing around that many of our families, individuals probably do, trying to get to the right place because there feels like a lack of coordination. And so focusing on those two things, the understanding of the continuum and the different populations that need specific care, and then that coordination of services.
Thank you. Mike?
One thing that simply occurs to me is that I fully agree with the housing first scenario. But as everyone on this task force understands, every city in the United States of America has innumerable jars where they need to put their money. And when it comes down to housing first, there's going to be a tremendous outlay for that. It's the kind of thing I would like to see. I don't know if it would be able to come to fruition, but that's one thing I'm getting. when it comes to the idea also of the outlay that would be needed, I had been doing just a short amount of thinking. That's the only way I can do it. City of Sioux Falls has approximately 1/5 of the population of the state of South Dakota. If you talk about Aberdeen, Watertown, Brookings, Pierre, Huron, Rapid City, some of the larger towns, smaller cities, if you'd like to call them that, probably make up another 1/5 of the population of South Dakota. That's where the homeless are going to be. If a man's got a 160 acres up by, let's say, Colson, he's not going to see a homeless person. Somebody over by Miller has 160 acres. He's not going to see a homeless person. Somebody out by Faith with 20,000 acres isn't going to see a homeless person. They're not going to see a problem. As a thought process, I feel that the city of Sioux Falls should have a liaison with Pierre concerning homelessness and see what funds could be made available in that way.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else have any thoughts they want to share before?
Share some thoughts if you want to.
Annie?
Okay.
I meant to say that with excitement.
I know, right? Rebecca is correct, along with a lot of the other people that have spoken. It's not just one solution. I think 211 is correct. We need to connect the databases. That's going to eliminate a lot of silos. We need the street outreach and the case management, which Urban Indian Health is working on. We need the Housing Trust Fund, which Thrive is working on. We do need to increase housing for those with addiction and mental illness. I think there's some state money capabilities there, and we do have a representative that works with the state. That would be me, and whoever else is working with the state. But I think there's opportunity there. We just need to make some different changes and progress on how things happen in Pierre. We need case management and housing. I think we need a stronger partnership between the mission, Bishop Dudley, and the county. I know that they have partnerships. I think that they need to be stronger, more streamlined services there. And the housing navigation tool that we started working on, we need to go back to that. That's my short list.
Thank you. All right, lots of good thoughts. Anybody else want to share before we wrap her up?
Sure, I'll toss out a few thoughts. I think some of the things that we need to focus on are just not always jumping to the negative. I think we have a lot of challenges, that's for sure, but I think as people bring up ideas, I think moving forward it's going to be critical that we focus on the positives that we do have, and that when change is suggested, that it isn't undermining, it isn't demeaning to anybody, it's just a way to try to grow and be creative. I think there's a real need for streamline. I think there is a lot of opportunity for agencies to come together to work a little bit differently. You know, when you look at the inventory of services that we have within Sioux Falls, oftentimes we have what I've kind of come to call kiosks, where things just pop up, and those services are offered for a short period of time, and then we all know that funding is a huge issue, right? And unfortunately, then things disappear, and the programming and the services that were once there are now gone. And so I think we have to think about long-term and sustainability. Without that, we're going to continue to do knee-jerk reactions. So I think as we look at plans, we have to consider that long-term and how we can be responsible. And I think it's looking at each agency to be able to best define who they are as well as what they are not. We go through that all the time at the county, what we are and what we are not. And I think that each agency needs to do that, and when we can hone in and we really work together to best define what each of those programs are, we can best tool them to function best. And I think when we can constructively create a community where services across the board are consistent, people are held accountable and responsible to be a team player, I think we can be much more successful. And I also think with communication, it's imperative. Having the data to be able to support what we need to do is imperative. Numbers don't lie, typically. You know, I think it's important when we look at numbers, we can all take numbers and we can make them dance, however we want them to tell the story. But I think it's imperative that we just look at things honestly, and just have honest, stern conversations of what we need to do as a community to function best.
Thank you. Lots of different ideas and perspectives here. I think it's really good, so I really appreciate everybody's willingness to share and stuff, and I'll try to summarize here a tinge and lay out an idea for how we move forward on the fly a little bit. You know, three things really stick out to me that I think kind of pick low-hanging fruit to stay positive, at the same time tackling some bigger issues as well. One thing I would propose is ask that we would, as a task force, ask Andy to bring us back over the next month specifically on the ID front. What can we do as a community to really strengthen the process of getting IDs, a system, program to make sure that IDs are readily available throughout our community. I'm not putting the right words in here exactly, but you know, saying this is really important. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to take that next step without that process strengthened. So it'd be maybe a lower hanging fruit item that we could just understand, strengthen.
Sorry, Rich. Caden and I met with Reynold Nesba about how to get IDs and birth certificates funded.
Perfect. You two will be talking. You two will be talking to Andy then. So we're not going to solve it right now. I'm just proposing an option to choose from to focus on. Secondly, it seems as though hearing a lot of housing first conversation. I think it's an area of general agreement and growing agreement across the community of saying we need to get, whether that's another safe home, whether it's something adjusted like that. But what I'm hearing from the group is let's dig in there a little bit more versus put in resource starting another shelter, for example. I'm not oversimplifying, I'm just saying let's put some resource in there. So maybe we would ask, Michelle is going to be kind of leading our next meeting potentially on the higher level housing, 30 to 60% AMI, but ask Michelle and Carrie and I maybe to meet on that piece and talk a little bit further in depth on the housing first of where we could potentially bring some thoughts together. And then the third item, I'm hearing a lot about collaboration, and it's one thing to say, hey, everybody go get along. Hey, start working together. But the reality is we're all kindergarten still. You never really grow out of that. And you need something to rally around. And I think we should really encourage collaboration by rallying around the helpline. It's much easier to go and say, hey, we'd really encourage you to participate in this because it's going to create collaboration and partnership through the community. And the collaboration becomes a byproduct of participating in the helpline versus, hey, we want you to collaborate and get along. So what can we do to encourage greater participation in the helpline? Let's take that conversation another level down to see what resources or community messaging, public education we could provide to encourage that collaboration. So those are the three kind of things I would see we could have some movement on moving out of here is IDs. Let's get some further detailed conversation on that. Let's have a more detailed meeting on housing first and specifically what type of housing first should we be a first priority for us to tackle. Third, how can we encourage the helpline even further, provide them the energy, resources, messaging to continue on the great work that they're doing. So those are the three things I'm going to propose that we kind of move forward on. The final one that I'd propose is that Councilor Selberg and I would volunteer to go have a conversation with the other entities. I think Mr. Patterson brought up a great point that we need to be straightforward and honest and ask everyone what their capacity is. We're not going to have another housing first thing solved by October. Councilor Selberg and I could go and to these other entities that are involved in the situation and say the council's working on this. Could you help us understand what your capacity is, maybe why you're over, maybe why you're under? And so coming and saying, what could we do to understand that further? Councilor, would you be willing to have that conversation with us?
I'd be happy to help.
So is there general agreement? In those three things, kind of saying, let's try to pick up some momentum on those three areas? Okay, so after this, Jim and I will sit down the next day or two, try to pick up some times, and we'll reach out to each of the kind of sub-entities to continue those conversations and so forth. But really appreciate everybody sharing their perspective and helping us to continue to move forward. Well, it's really important that we continue to hear from the public as well, and it's 5:45, so we've brought this right to the perfect time. If you're here from the public, we have an opportunity to come and share with us as well. Each member of the public has 3 minutes if they wish to address the task force. So you can come and share for 3 minutes, and love to hear your perspective as well. Any members of the public wish to share their perspective tonight?
A long bike ride today, sorry. I'll keep it brief. Thank you, friends, for allowing me to do this. My name is Mark Leonard. My family and I moved here 2 years ago from Southern California. I'm a native of Southern Californian. My wife is from Canastota, South Dakota. She's a Dakota girl, so I learned about the wonders of South Dakota 30 years ago plus, and always enjoyed it. The wheels were finally coming off, so we pulled the trigger and moved here, yes. Sioux Falls, my home. I've got 30 years experience in homeless ministry through a ministry called Jackets for Jesus out of Riverside, California, from Central Community Christian Fellowship. Pastor Eric Denton, I'm flinging this out there because you may want to follow up. Feeding the homeless in Skid Row in Los Angeles every Sunday night, leaving Riverside at 8 p.m., setting up for years under the radar. Finally, we're sanctioned by the powers that be in LA, and pursued that, and through volunteer, just loving on people. The drug of choice, unfortunately, in LA right now is heroin and methamphetamine. I know a lot of guys down there, and they go to Riverside to get the better methamphetamine to bring it back to LA. It's just all that stuff happening, folks. And needles on the street, thousands and thousands and thousands of people running around naked with needles sticking out of their arms. It's just beyond heinous. And so, in all the years I've been involved with that, there's the one truth that I feel that needs to be addressed, and it's something I think you all would agree with, and it's almost kind of like the elephant in the room. And that's, I hear people don't want to be accountable, and the mental illness, and buddy, I've seen it all. I've seen it all. But here's the real issue, folks. You gotta eliminate drugs, first of all. First of all, we've got open borders now. What does that mean? It sounds like we're talking kind of on a reactionary level, but I think we need to be really thinking in the future here regarding all this. Open borders, serious, serious drugs coming through. You will see it manifested, I promise you. And so until this is addressed, I'm a positive guy. I like to be, the glass is almost full, but this is the real deal, folks. It needs to be addressed, okay? So thank you for your time, huh?
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Mark. Other members of the public that would like to speak tonight? Can hop right on up next. Welcome.
Sure. Hi, I'm Phyllis Ahrens. I just want to restate a lot of what Madeline said. I said she kind of just stole my whole thing, but Carrie Benz and I remember the days when I was a nurse at 5th Street Connection, and we had that big, beautiful blue house on 8th and Minnesota Avenue. It was a transition house for 12 people who had serious mental illness but needed to learn the skills to live successfully in the community. That house went. Those services never got replaced. I'm working with a small group of family members who have their loved ones in another city in South Dakota because Sioux Falls does not offer transitional housing for people with serious mental illness. They've got some for people who have substance abuse, but not when your diagnosis is schizophrenia and you're not addicted to drugs. Another thing I kind of wrote down here is as we talk about facilities, a lot of people are not in my backyard. Downtown is sacred property. We don't want those guys living downtown with me. So Don't shove them out into some place just because they don't fit. And yeah, decent, affordable housing. We heard the talk about felons, how hard it is for them to get a place to live. I'm actually working with these families to set up some time with legislators. We've got to change some laws or whatever it takes so that people don't have to live in some slumlord's basement. Yep, and the supported housing, that's my big thing is not everyone has the skills to live independently. They need to be taught how to do that. So I think if we can get our big blue house back someplace with some supported housing, we'll find a lot of the need for Bishop Dudley to go down.
Thank you, Phyllis. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a community member. I am a seasoned community member. I am a grandmother, great-grandmother, and mother, and aunt. And I'm here because I'm curious because my grandson was on the streets, no longer on the streets. He was homeless for 3 months and became a member of, I think, Madeline's place, and he liked it there. He was in and out of the hospital for 3 months, March, April, and May. The last month, May, he was admitted as a John Doe. He Bertolus Bridges became homeless after he passed on. I don't know if you remember hearing about the unidentified man that was found in the river June 14th. That was my grandson. We loved him, we cared for him very much. He was a workaholic when he worked. He had issues with alcohol and drugs. He has 4 children, and which 3 are in my daughter's care. I wished I had known about these programs before. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing. I never knew about this program. And I'm curious, so I'm here. Because I said, what can I do for my grandson? How can I honor him? I go down to the Statue of David, and we used to sit on that bench down there, but they removed it and they said it was bent, so we used to sit there and just pray and think about him. I now go down to some of the homeless people, and I saw some today and took food to them. And I asked one lady, I said, I'm going to this homeless meeting today. I don't know what it's all about, but I'm curious. She said she wants to get a job. She needs an ID. She wants to get off the street. So thank you, Carrie. I want to see you if I can get a card from you. Thank you. So I've learned a lot of information by being here. And I want to be of help to the people on the street. I am Native American, and I go up to the people. I'm not afraid of them, only if I feel their energy is negative, and I can feel it. And if I feel that negative energy, I stay away. But I'm there, and it helps. My daughters and I go down there and bring water and just sit and talk to them, not at them, but to them. And that lady I helped today recognized me. She said, how is your daughter doing? I said, she's not doing very well. But I am the parent, grandparent, who lost a son. You need to see that real faction of us as people and who we are and how hard it is, even as relatives. My daughter and I would be tag teams. She would be going down. She'd have to take his daughter to therapy on Sycamore, and she'd drive down 10th Street. Mom, I saw Drew today, she said, I said, where is he at? She called me up and tell me I'd get in my car and go drive. The story's probably the same as a lot of people, but I go down there and find him and I talk to him. And I said, Drew, if you're hungry, I'm here to help you. He said, no, I'm okay. But each time I saw him, he was getting worse and worse. And he ended up dead in the river. And he was my grandson. Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to share. Sorry to hear about your loss. Other members of the community that would like to address the task force tonight? Well, task force members, thank you for your time and your commitment. This is obviously extremely important. We're talking about people, we're talking about our community, and we want to put our best energy forward of helping the people of our city. So thank you for your willingness to be here and participate. Jim and I will follow up in the next day or two here with our next step on those items. And Michelle and I are meeting this Friday to talk about the agenda of our next meeting as well. So we'll follow up on that item as well. So we'll close out our meeting there for today, and have a great night, everyone. Thank you.